Let's build this spiffy app that takes our GitHub profile and turns it into a README using ChatGPT AI. And we'll do that using 3 technologies. We will use NextJS 13, we'll use OpenAI, of course, to do the AI, and we'll use a system called Defer. So AI is many things, but it's not particularly fast, and customers want responses in the 200 millisecond range. So what Defer allows us to do is start the AI process on a remote service, Defer, and then we can check to see how that status is going, and then once it's done, it responds to us. And it's really nice because we can just go and take almost any function in our application, wrap it in one of these Defers, and then fire it off to this service, and it will manage that long-running job for us, which has been kind of a pain point in Node for a long time. How do you manage things that take longer than those 200 milliseconds? Now, I do want to be fully honest with you. This is not an ad for Defer, but they did help write a lot of the source for this, and for that, I'm very grateful for them. It's just a lot of work to build the code for these videos, and they just help to accelerate that process, and I'm very thankful for that. All right, without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so before we start off, there are some prerequisites. First, we need a GitHub personal access token, and you need to go generate one of those with these permissions. You need the public repo permission, and you also need the read a user permission. That's because they're just going to go read a profile, get back their information about their public repos, and then use that to seed OpenAI. And of course, we need the OpenAI account keys as well. So you need to register for that service and either use the free trial or get a paid subscription like I have, and then get a key for that. So you need both of those keys, and you need to get them loaded into the .env file in the project. So let's go over and take a look at the project. Now, all the source code for this video is located in a link in the description right down below. There are 2 directories in there. In the completed project, there is the starter one, which is where our starting point is, and then there is the completed directory that has the completed project. So right now we just have our starter, so I'm going to go and copy that into the completed directory. All right, now that I have our completed directory, I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to use the yarn command to install it, and then yarn dev to run it. Okay, here's what it looks like to start. We've got our GitHub README AI generator headline, got a little bit of explanatory text in here, and then there's an input where you can enter your name, Jahur, for example, and then hit generate. And of course, it does nothing right now, so let's go back and take a look at the project. So we'll go over here into completed, and let's take a look in our app directory. And the critical piece is over here in the page. So the page is a use client page. It is run on the client because it's got that interaction. It's got hooks. In this case, it's got the use state to monitor that username state. It's got a little data that we're going to populate. And then it's got our HTML. So pretty simple. What this is going to do is it's going to post to a route. So over here, it's going to post a API, GitHub profile, and then the username. And this is using the new NextJS 13 API system. This came out just in the last couple of weeks. It's a different API system than we had before, where the NextJS 13 app directory used to have no support for APIs. You had to go put that in the pages directory. Now there is support for APIs, and it looks like this. So you export these functions like post and get. Those correspond to the verbs. And in this case, we're going to use post to initiate the request, and we're going to use get to then monitor that request until it's completed. How are we going to make that request? Well, we're going to go over here into the source directory, and we have a client. That's going to be our React query client. So that's going to give us our provider. We use that over in the layout. So we've got our client provider in here. That's going to give us our React query. So we're going to use React query to make that get in that post. And then over in the defer directory, that's a special directory, so it has to be /source/defer. We have our generate GitHub profile.ts. So this is the starting point for our project. So at this point, we only have support to go and get the GitHub user information. And the way that we do that is we use GraphQL for that. So we create a GraphQL with auth client using our GitHub PA token. which we then set in our .env file. So you can look at the .env example over here. These are the 3 tokens we're going to need. You're going to need that GitHub token, the OpenAI API token, and then the defer token once we have that. So we currently have the GitHub token, and then we're going to use this get GitHub info function to call the GraphQL with that authorized client. And what we're going to get out of that is we're going to get some user info. We're going to get the user, the login. We're going to get some information about the top 10 projects that they've got and the languages that those projects use. So we're going to seed our OpenAI. We're going to say, hey, you use JavaScript, you use Go, you use Rust or whatever. And we're going to go and seed that and say, hey, go and make us up some README about how I use a bunch of Rust. And also how good my stars are. So we're going to go and get the repo stars as well and total those up and then fire that off as well. So then we give it our GitHub username and we get back all of this information. And this is all typed up here in the GitHub info, and that's what comes out of this. So I have an idea. Let's go and actually use this. So we'll go get the function. We'll bring it over here into routes. And we'll get that from the @defer directory within source. So now we've got our GitHub info, and we can then make that call. So we're just going to get our response by awaiting that with the username. And we'll take that response, and then we will send it back as JSON. Okay, let's go over into our page, and then we'll make that call. So to do that post, we need to use a mutation. So we're going to use mutation from React Query to do that. So now that we have our async mutation function, we're going to do our fetch with the method post on that API endpoint. All right, so we've got our fetch. We're going to go to that GitHub profile. We're going to give it the username that we have from the local context, and then we're going to get our JSON back. Looks good so far. So let's call mutate when we hit that button. So now when we're successful, we have to go and get that data back. So in the case of a mutation, we want to hang on the on-success event. Now, all we want to do at this point is really just know if we're getting the right data back. So we're just going to console log it. All right, let's give it a try. All right, let me put in my username and then hit generate. Now we'll go over here to the console and see what we get. All right, looks pretty good. We've got all of our data back from our GraphQL request from GitHub. So pretty much half the way there. Now we need to go and format that for our request to OpenAI. So back over here in the defer generate GitHub profile, I'm going to go bring in some imports from OpenAI, including the configuration and the OpenAI API. All right, now down here where we create our GraphQL authorization, let's go and create our OpenAI connection. Seems reasonable. Let's create a new function called generate GitHub profile. And in there, we're going to await our GitHub info, which we just created up here. Okay, so that looks good. Now we've got our data. Now we need to format a prompt that we're going to send to OpenAI. Now you can construct this prompt any way you want to. Here's what we came up with. Write a funny 5-sentence GitHub profile description with 2 emojis, and you give it the data. Where I live, the languages that I've written in, and then how many stars I have. And it's just a piece of text. And then we're going to go send that off to the completion engine, and that'll give us back our description. To do that, we call create completion on OpenAI. It's an async function. Obviously, it's going to take a while. And we use the Text DaVinci model. We give it our prompt, and we give it a bunch of extra stuff, the number of tokens we want, and we kind of tweak it a little bit. You can, of course, tweak it any way you want to. And then out of that, we're going to take the top result. So we're going to take the data that comes back, we're going to kind of take the choices, and we're going to take the top result and then get the text from that. Okay, so now instead of calling our get GitHub info, let's call instead generate GitHub profile and see what happens. Okay, let's go back over to our arc, hit generate again. And this is going to take significantly more time as it goes off to OpenAI, which is the problem that we're going to address using defer. Oh, it came back. Cool. I'm a web development wizard living in the magical Happy Valley, Oregon. This is pretty good, actually. That's pretty awesome. It seems all you can see is the greatness within my code. Wow. It said it, not me. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to set that up on defer so that we can invoke it remotely and then monitor its progress and then get back the result when it's done, but not lock up the whole UI like we did there doing this. To do that, we go back to the code, go back into that generate GitHub profile, and then we're just going to wrap that function, generate GitHub profile, in defer. So defer comes from the defer client, and you give it a concurrency. That's the number of potential jobs that you can have simultaneously, and that's it. The fact that it's in that special directory, source defer, is enough to basically create a job in defer land. So now the next step is to get our code up onto defer. The way that we do that is we create a GitHub project with it. So let me go create a GitHub project real fast. I'll call it GitHub AI generator, and it'll be public. Let's create it. And I'm just going to grab out the remote add origin. Now I'm going to create that Git repo inside of just completed. And that's important because you want that source defer directory to be in the right spot so that defer can see our functions that we're going to be able to defer to. Okay, let's take a look. Looks like it's up there. So let's go over to our defer, and we've logged in. Now we need to set up an application. So we're going to look for GitHub here. GitHub AI generator, and we'll select that. Now we do need to add those environment variables for GitHub and OpenAI. So I'm going to go do that, but I'm not going to show you because they're secret. Okay, with that done, I'm going to hit create. And now we need to push again to get it to run the build. So let's go back over to our Visual Studio Code. All right, let's see if it's building. Yep, it's building. All right, let's go see our functions. And we have our generate GitHub profile function. Awesome. Now there's one thing that we do need to do, and that's get our defer token. And that's the token that we'll use when we make our requests to that function. So let me go back over to our Visual Studio Code, and then I will go and set that. Looks good. And now we'll do yarn dev. One more thing before we leave this particular file. Notice that the default export of generate GitHub profile is that deferred function. So that's what we're going to import over into our route. And now let's try it. So this time I'm going to hit generate again. And this time I get back an ID, and that's a job ID. So let's go and see if that's actually running over on defer. I can take a look at our functions, and then we can see we have executions, and we can see we have a successful execution. I'm going to go in and view that. We can see that we have a result. We can see our arguments that we sent. We can get the logs. That's pretty freaking cool. So now we just need to connect that to the UI. Let's go see how easy that is. So in order to complete this, we need to be able to poll the service every second to see if it's done. And that's what this get does. So to do that, we need to bring in get execution from defer client, and that's going to tell us how our execution is doing. So we're going to get given the execution ID, and then we run that get execution with that execution ID, and that's going to give us back this response, which we then pass back as JSON. All right, let's go over to our page. So now we get back as data an ID, right? That execution ID. And we need to have some place to store that, so let's create some state for that. And now once we have an ID, now we can start going to poll to see how that's going. So we're going to create a use query for that. And we'll get rid of the data. And we'll call this the query job status query. So this function is going to do a get as opposed to a post on that same route, GitHub profile. But this time it's going to use that execution ID that we got from the post result. Now that execution ID is essentially the ID of the job. So now we're going to send that back to it and say, how's that job doing? And it's going to give us back a result that says, I'm created, I'm running, or I'm done, and here's the data, or I'm canceled, or whatever. Now we're going to give it some options. And the first option tells us, don't actually run until you have an execution ID, right? That makes sense. The second option we want to give it is the refresh interval. How often do we want to go and hit the API to see if we're done or not? And we're just going to use 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. And then finally, we need to look at the data coming back, because every one of these requests is going to be at 200. It's going to tell us if we're done or not. And then we look at the data and we see, well, are we actually done? And if we are done, then we're going to set that execution ID to null. We're done, right? We don't need to keep polling, and so we disable the polling. So we're going to look at the data coming back. We're going to say, hey, if we have a result, or if we say that we're canceled, then we set that execution ID to null. Okay, let's try this out. Let's hit generate. Okay, it looks like it's doing pretty good. You can see it flashing. That's because my React Dev Tools is running, and that's doing a render every time we get a React query, so every second, and bang! There we go. That's really cool. Okay, let's see what I came up with. I'm a coder living in Happy Valley, avid GitHub user. Sure. Most of my code is split between JavaScript, ActionScript? Really? And Ruby. I'm proud to say that my work is rewarded 1,891 GitHub stars. Thank you so much, by the way, for that. And guess you can tell me stars to the coder. I love it. I like spending time in the park with friends. It totally just made that up, by the way. You know, that whole AI making stuff up, it just totally made that up. But okay, that's fine. One more thing we can do before we wrap this up is to deploy it to Vercel. Let's see how easy that is. Let's go over to Vercel, and then we'll add a new project. Import our GitHub AI generator. And now this time for environment variables, all I need to send is the defer token, right? Because defer is the one that's actually talking to GitHub, and defer is the one that's actually talking to OpenAI. So it needs those secrets. All this one needs to know is the defer token so that it can talk to defer. Paste that in there, and add, and then deploy. All right, looks like we're good to go. Let's click on it and see. Go to my GitHub name, generate. And there it is, deployed in a single step, and all I needed to do was set that defer token, because defer was the one doing all of the work with GitHub and with OpenAI. All right, well, I think that's a really fun AI project for you. It shows you how to use NextJS 13, its new API routes, how to use OpenAI, and how to use this open beta defer service to go and really easily move long-running jobs onto a remote service, start them up, and get status, and then get results back. It's super simple. All right, well, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really like the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click on that bell and be notified the next time a new Blue Collar Coder comes out.